Hey, friends at Sulphur. Well, it's great to see you. This is Bob Turner, and I've been with you the past few summers, and I really regret that I can't make the drive out to join your meeting, but this is how we're going to have to do things here. I love getting to visit you each summer. Hopefully this year, Bob will actually watch this video because he always ducks away the week that I come out to visit you. And last summer, I brought my two girls, Julia and Catherine, and we got to hang out. And so I'm going to miss walking your building with your cool square in the middle of the lobby there and all your nice folks hanging out on those couches in that kind of Chip and Joanna look or whatever you've got going there. And I just miss your hospitality and warmth and all of the smiling people that we get to hang out with. But hopefully today we can do a little bit of a Bible study and think about a topic that I think is really practical for us and really important as we think about this moment that we're in. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and turn it to Mark chapter 2. And I'm going to think about a pretty familiar story that's one of Jesus's miracle stories, but I want to think about it in the context of something that all of us deal with every day. So go ahead, get that Bible. Let's think about Mark chapter 2. And beginning in verse 1, it says, "When he returned to Capernaum after some days, it was reported that he was at home. So many gathered around there, and there was no longer any room for them, not even in front of the door. And he was speaking a word to them, and some people came bringing to him a paralyzed man carried by four of them. Then some people came bringing that man, and when they could not bring him to Jesus because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him, and after having dug through it, they let down the mat on which the paralyzed man was laying." Let's pause here. I was teaching this text one time and I recalled John chapter 9. You'll remember in that story, Jesus is walking by a pool and he sees a man who's been crippled and he's laying next to the pool. And Jesus says, "Well, have you just been laying there?" And the man says, "Well, I don't have anybody to put me into the water." So Jesus says, "Well, okay, get up and walk. Let's do this way." And the man who'd been laying by the pool, we don't exactly know everything about his circumstance in that story, but it says that he had been crippled for 38 years. And then it turns to this story. This is in Mark chapter 2. And Jesus there has a situation in which people, in the Greek word, it's actually said they unroofed the roof. They tear out this roof to bring this paralyzed man to Jesus. You can imagine being in that house that day and there's thatch and dirt and pieces of debris falling in on you. When this story is told in Luke, it says that they pulled up tiles off the roof to get them in there, which would signal maybe Luke's more Mediterranean background, Greco-Roman architecture background. And it says there that the man who was paralyzed actually didn't bring himself there. That would have been beyond his control. He was carried there. We might very simply make one distinction between the man in John who's laying by the pool and the man in Mark who's brought to Jesus. The man in Mark has friends. Friendships are one of the most important things that we have in our life, and it's something that we actually don't talk about all the time. That there's sometimes it sounds too common, or we're reluctant to talk about our friends, and we're reluctant to kind of just go ahead and say it, how significant this is. I was listening to a conversation recently between some ministers, and the ministers said that in their experience in church, a man who is in an unhappy marriage but has a lot of friends is less likely to have an affair than a man who's in a happy marriage and has no friends. Think about that one. But the importance of friendship is something that a lot of us feel and a lot of us kind of understand, but maybe we need to kind of lay out some facts about how important this is. You know, on average, we have 5 friends. Now, this is probably just an average. The truth is that that's just an average because women probably have 10 and men have 0, and so the average is 5. But that's probably not enough. We probably all recognize that we could have some more. My wife is amazing with friends. Andrea considers it a good day if she's made a new friend. I consider it a good day if I haven't made any enemies. Some have said that the greatest miracle in the life of Jesus might be that he was a man in his 30s who had 12 good friends. Okay, 11 good friends. People acknowledge that only 25% of us have a friendship with somebody who lives in our neighborhood. 25%. Jesus says to love your neighbor. Maybe he should have started with meet your neighbor. In 1985, 10% of Americans said, I have nobody in my life with whom I can discuss the most important things that trouble me. Okay? 10%. So 1 out of every 10 people said, I've got no one. They went around and did the study again in 2005. That number had gone up to 25%. 1 out of every 4 people said, I have no one to talk about with the things that matter most to me. Men are more than twice as likely to be lonely as women. And so today I would like to make a case for friendship using this story of Jesus. Jesus is a man who believes in natural male human community and female community. That Jesus is almost always, though at times he does say that he needs to get away, that Jesus is a person who practices and assumes that people should have community around them in the form of friendship, that Jesus calls disciples, that is, Jesus is always with people. And that for us, it's just amazing to think about with all the ability we have, all the transportation we have, all of the neighborhoods we have, that somehow, if you look at Jesus and you look at us, we have considerably less friends. And so in the stories he tells, we need to see that there is a subtext here that speaks to the importance of human community. And that if you were laying on a mat and unable to get somewhere, that you would have 4 people who would help you get there. And so the question I want to ask today is, are we building lives to be like the man who lays by the pool and has no one to help him? Or building lives to be like the man who has friends to lift him through the ceiling? All right. The first thing I want to talk about is the importance of making friends. This is the hardest thing to do because a lot of us would like to assume that friendships just come to us naturally. And the hard thing is, just like love or anything else, it really never just happens. That friendship is something that needs to be cultivated and requires serious attention. Proverbs 17:7, a friend loves at all times and a brother is born for adversity. We need more good friends, and it's going to require us to take seriously the importance of friends. Now, there's one thing that really troubles me as we think about this topic, and it's this, and some researchers have kind of caught on to the idea that it's possible that we have used professionals in our lives to take care of things that formerly we would have, resolved with friendships. Let me give you an example here. A scholar named Ronald Dworkin was doing a study for the Hoover Institution. And in a 2010 paper, he said, this is what was going on in the 1940s. Okay, so he studied the labor force of the 1940s. And here's what we have. In the 1940s, we had 2,500 clinical psychologists in this country, 30,000 social workers, and fewer than 500 marriage and family therapists. In 2010, 70 years later, 77,000 clinical psychologists, 192,000 clinical social workers, 400,000 non-clinical social workers, 50,000 marriage and family therapists, 105,000 mental health counselors, 220,000 substance abuse counselors, 17,000 nurse psychotherapists, and 30,000 life coaches. I want to go ahead and say right at the beginning that if any of you belong to any of those professions, you're incredibly valuable. I'm so thankful for you that life was not necessarily better in 1940s. We have developed an understanding of some significant clinical issues that we can address now in ways that we were not able to address them. And so if you are a therapist, a social worker, a life coach, thank you. That said, is it possible that we have all of these professionals maybe filling some roles that were formerly filled by friends? If it's true that just in the past 30 years, since 1985 and 2005, between those dates, which was a 30-year span, if we went from 10% of people saying they're totally lonely to 25% of people saying they're totally lonely, that perhaps the decline of friendships has increased the professional need for these roles. Are we using specialists to fulfill functions in our life formerly done by friends? I preached this, said that in church one time, went up to one of my friends who's a therapist in church, almost like, I was like, I am so sorry. I just want to say in advance, I'm so sorry because I know I probably offended your profession. My therapist friend looked at me and said, 90% of the work I do are things that people could work through if they just had one friend. One friend. University of Chicago author wrote the book Loneliness, studied the DNA of our bodies, went in and looked at our actual human composition, said that we are lacking epinephrine. It's changed with time. You can study this. It's a hormone. And he says this, he says that scientists have found increased levels of epinephrine in the urine of lonely people, which is an interesting medical pursuit. But anyway, he says this all to say that our loneliness is changing our physical bodies. Loneliness is perhaps killing us. Social media researchers have determined that there is one recent emergence that has a profound ability to make people feel lonely, and that's social media, which was founded on the promise of giving us friends. So we're going to have to think about strategies to make friends. And it's important that these are friends who are people who are good for us. And so as we say make friends, we want to recognize that the Bible is not totally just 100% comprehensively supportive of just going out and making friends. James chapter 4, you adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is enmity toward God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. And so there is an idea here that making friends is not enough. We must make good friends. Now, all of you know this already, that all of you have people in your life who are just not good for you. You have friends who might morally compromise you. You have friends who make things awkward and difficult and are just a big kind of piece of anxiety hanging over you. You have friends who you believe their role in your life is to drain you, to complain to you, to take all of the energy that you had that day and suck it from you. And that you believe that this person entering your life is just to make you more negative. We need to put boundaries around ourselves to make sure that we have good friendships. And I believe that I'm at my healthiest and I'm at my best when I'm able to balance friendships. That we cannot be Pharisees. We can't go through our life saying that we will not be around anybody who we believe is not as morally superior as us. That's not what I'm saying. But that we have a balance of friendships where there's friendships that are based on having really similar values, but there's also friendships that are based that we are actually a helper in somebody's life. There are friendships that we probably should have where the person just desperately needs us even though it drains us. But that can't be all of our friendships. There's toxic friendships that we have that we need to cut, that we need to somehow put boundaries and put a person in place that says, if you're not going to change this, we can't be friends. That your habits are toxic in some way. And so making good friends is part of what this means. That we not just making friends, but making good friends. We've encouraged our daughters, don't just make friends, form communities that actually bless you and bless the world. One way that we tell this to them, especially to our older child, is don't just go out and look for everybody who looks just like you, acts just like you, and has everything in common with you. That's an amazing type of friendship. And having the person who can finish your sentences and you can nod together, that's a special friendship. But that also mimics some cultural models in which we assume that friends should be just like us. Think about our television shows that are about friends. We can start with the show Friends. We might do Grey's Anatomy, How I Met Your Mother, Seinfeld, New Girl, all of these shows. If you look at those collections of friends, what are they about? Largely white, upper middle class, professional class, generally quite educated, metropolitan, cosmopolitan, socially liberal friendships. They operate among a sort of shared social contract. Is that the best we can do? I would ask our daughters, I would just say, is that the sort of friendship that God is calling you to? Or is there a more kingdom-focused sort of friendship where, yeah, there are people that you're friends with who can finish your sentences and like the same clothes you like and the same cars you like and the same lifestyle? But is there a friend who needs your friendship? For every person that you have that can finish your sentences, is there a person on a mat who needs carried? And that's the friendship. Is there a friend who needs a friend? Is there a friend of a different social background, a different economic class, a different skin color, where you believe that that friendship could be something that would be educational, maybe for both of you? What would that friendship look like? I think in churches, we need to think a lot about this as we think about things like the declining population of people coming to church, the declining role of the church in communities, and the increased diversity of our country as more and more people are coming from Latino backgrounds and multicultural backgrounds. And thinking about that my role as a friend might not be simply about latching on to people I have a lot in common with, because it could be that I have less in common with the general person in the culture in our neighborhood of our church than you might have assumed you would have a few years ago. Some really good stuff here. Gary McIntosh and Charles Arnn wrote a book called What Every Pastor Needs to Know. Here we go. 82% of people who begin joining a new church drop out, who visit a church drop out in the first year. So 82% of people, it doesn't stick. And they went through, when you're curious, like if a person gave this much work on visiting a church and meeting people, then what exactly happened that it didn't work? They say that people, when they visit a church at the 6-month point, just begin looking at each other and their family if they're visiting a church, and they ask one simple question. They really just boil it down. And now I want to say in advance, they kind of have things they've already discussed. People visit a church the first time, they're going to make comments about things like music and warmth of the people they meet and the preacher. They're going to have already said a lot of that. But at the 6-month point, there's something they want to evaluate. And what they say is, have we met friends? Do we have friends? And if they say we have no friends, they will probably just cut off right there and they'll go somewhere else. They'll try something new. They may not try anything at all. But if their answer is positive, they'll probably hang around for another 6 months. And McIntosh says that at the next 6-month point, they're going to ask another very simple question. And this one is the one that really kind of speaks to me as a church leader and as a dad and as a husband and as a just kind of a leader in our community. Listen to this one. He says, they will ask, are these friends better than the friends we used to have? Are these people more encouraging than our old friends? Are they more sympathetic than our old friends? Are they upright in a way that we were looking for that our old friends were not? Do they gossip just like our old friends did? Are they unreliable just like our old friends were? Are they hypocritical like our old friends were? We came looking for friends. At the 6-month point, we decided we had found them. And at the 12-month point, we just want to know, are these friends we need to be with? And so the question for us, I think, as a church and as a people is not only are we interested in making good friends, but are we available as good friends? Are we looking and eager to become friends, even at a point where we may not have thought we needed a new friend? There might be somebody coming to your church. There might be somebody in your neighborhood or somebody in your community. And when they look at you, they may not be looking for a teacher. They may not be looking for a prophet. They might not be looking for a life coach. They might simply be looking for a friend. So be a good friend who makes a good friend. All of you can probably think of people in your own network, in your own communities, who just are good friends. They're easy to talk to. They're easy to like. They might overlaugh at a joke. They might listen a little longer than other people listen. They might be just a tad less physically judgmental than others. They might be a little bit more patient, and you really like being your friend. Here's the thing, that's not easy for them. Some people, that might be a serious discipline that they are working on to try to be what we would call friendly. And while in churches, we might treat it sometimes like being friendly is just kind of a personality trait, it's not. This can be a work of the Spirit. That if we take this seriously as a theological truth, that Jesus came to be a friend and that Jesus expects us to be spiritual friends, that then the things that people associate with friendship become things that have to become disciplines in our life and that flow through us and that aren't just personality traits. These can become fruits of the Spirit. We have a friend at church who is in his 70s, who is kind of he calls himself a late bloomer spiritually. And he decided while he was in his late 60s, he wanted to learn what it meant to be a church leader. So he asked another church leader who was 15 years older than him, teach me how to do this. And one of the things that he impressed upon him as well, just look for people who are younger than you and affirm them and encourage them and give them high fives in the hallway and learn their names. And now, if you go to our church, before we were closed and if we were mulling around the hallways, you would see this man on his knee, giving high fives to the kids, calling them by names, giving them a hug. He does not have a charismatic personality. He is not big and boisterous and joyful. And yet, every child knows his name, and every child considers him one of their friends because he tried to be a friend. I think this is going to be one of the greatest challenges for our churches moving ahead. I think if anyone's paying attention at all, they should have noticed by this point that most people who are unchurched, which is becoming an increasing percentage of the population, are not necessarily looking for churches that line up with a particular set of doctrinal convictions. That people are not out on the market as spiritual, religious free agents looking for churches that match their doctrinal theological checklists. That's not how it's working right now. I do think that if we pay attention and we think that people are social animals who are fundamentally craving community, but we know factually that they have 5 friends, that we might see it as a tremendous opportunity for our churches. So we use all this language for church like we want to be a light and we want to be a body of water. We want to be a fire. We want to be a rock. We use all of this metaphorical imagery for our church. What about trying to be a friend? What about being the person who's willing to carry the mat when somebody needs a hand? And what about being the vulnerable person who's willing to lay on the mat and get carried when you don't think you can make it alone? So be a friend, be a good friend. Be a person who encourages others to be good friends. And you might save someone's life. You might give somebody a sense of hope. You might be the friend they've never thought that they needed. You might be the friend they've always known they wanted. And like the guys in this story, you might ultimately lead somebody to Jesus. All right, Sulphur, well, God bless you in your ministry, and I thank you so much for your partnership in the kingdom. Bob, great to see you as always. Thank you for the work and that you're doing. Maybe we can do something like this next summer. Hope you all have a great summer. Stay cool, and we look forward, hopefully, to seeing you in person another time. Take care. God bless you.